what I am looking at from the game last night, and listen, this game, like every game, and nobody will tell you that more than our guest at 12:30, Ian Beckles, was won in the trenches. Some people said last night, oh, yeah, that's the reason why Philly won this game. That's the way that most teams win Super Bowls and win national, football games. It's won and lost in the trenches. And especially when there's such a big disparity like we saw last night with the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line, where Joe Tooney's done such a great job filling in, bumping out to left tackle, but he's not a natural left tackle. He's a guard. He went out there out of necessity, and he was exposed last night. I don't know if you can put that on him because he really rose to the occasion, but that's the reality. In the trenches is where Philly won this game. And the fact that they didn't have to blitz one time and got home with 4 time and time and time again tells you all that you need to know. A lot of blame is going to go to Patrick Mahomes, and deservedly so. He's the quarterback. He's going to get the praise when they win. He's going to get some of the blame when they lose. But I put a lot more of this on the offensive line and the inability to adjust by Andy Reid. I was very, very shocked at kind of they were frozen. It was like they were paralyzed by the lack of the ability to analyze what was going on in that game. Players didn't make plays that they needed to. You look at a guy like Travis Kelce with the drops. I hated his attitude and disposition last night. He looked like he didn't even want to be there. Drop passes from a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, one of the most sure-handed receivers we've seen in the last decade in the National Football League. The Kansas City Chiefs did not look like 2-time defending Super Bowl champions last night. They didn't. Not at all. They looked like the team that was overwhelmed by the moment. And I look at Andy Reid and I wonder, how come you abandoned the run? I mean, you look at how many times he ran the football against Buffalo, and then a ton of times they ran the football against the Buffalo Bills. And I know they weren't all design runs, but they ran the ball 35 times in the AFC Championship game against the Buffalo Bills. Andy, you're a future Hall of Fame coach. You saw that your offensive line couldn't block, and yet you're still dropping in Patrick Mahomes back to pass time and time and time. How the hell else are you going to slow down that pass rush? You got to run the football. The fact that when you look at what Kareem Hunt did last night or didn't do last night, I mean, my goodness. Kareem Hunt, Isaiah Pacheco, they had no chance to impact this game because Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs, they panicked. Kareem Hunt ran the ball 3 times for 9 yards last night. Isaiah Pacheco ran the ball 3 times for 7 yards last night. And we're going to talk about this in a bit, but it's not about the yards. It's about the attempts. The Chiefs panicked, and their game plan went right out the window. And I know when you look at the Chiefs, and you look at the short passing game, that's almost an extension of the run game. I get that. But if Travis Kelce isn't coming up with these grabs and some of these other guys aren't making catches, you have to run the football. Creativity is not just creativity in the passing game. You got to get creative in the running game as well. We've seen that right here in the Tampa Bay area. Liam Cohen coming here and the pre-snap motion and those crackback blocks. And you see Payne Durham, a guy that nobody thought could block, coming from one side of the line of scrimmage, boom, getting right in the face of the opposition center and opening up holes in the middle of that defensive line. Why couldn't the Chiefs do that yesterday? I was very surprised at their lack of effectiveness, but also just the lack of intelligence. They were just stunned. They got knocked down in the first round, and they just could not. I don't care what the score is. They put up 22 points. But that was one of the ugliest performances we've seen in Super Bowl history. I don't care what that final score is. A multiple-time champion putting on that kind of effort on the precipice of history. You could win 3 championships, 3 Super Bowls in a row. It's not something we've never seen in the NFL. And that was the kind of – it's one thing to get beat, but to get beat like that, woof, that was ugly, man. That was not a championship performance by any means. Now, as far as the legacy of Patrick Mahomes goes, now this is a bump in the road for me. Nothing more, nothing less. I mean, it doesn't end the GOAT conversation. I know some people say, oh, this ends the conversation. Tom Brady's the GOAT, no matter what. It doesn't, because the GOAT conversation is still going. Let's not forget, Patrick Mahomes is 29 years old. There's a great chance he's going to be doing this for another decade at least. And there's probably even better chance that he's going to find some way, somehow, to get back to the Super Bowl again. That dude is a champion. And that doesn't change because of what happened last night. Tom Brady lost 3 Super Bowls. Let's not forget that. Yes, the 2 performances that Mahomes had in the losses were rough, but to me, you can put that just as much on his O-line than you can him. Remember the injuries for Kansas City in that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They clearly did not have enough in that position group to be able to combat what the Bucs were doing just a couple of years ago. In Brady's 3 losses, it was the Giants and the Eagles defensive lines that were the standout position groups. So it's no different in the Mahomes losses. Every single game, won and lost in the trenches. It doesn't change just because it's the Super Bowl. Now, as far as Philly goes, the defensive line, magnificent. Cooper DeJean, you're never going to buy a cheesesteak in Philly again. And even though Saquon didn't go off, Philly stayed true and handed him the ball 25 times. Ian said this before. I say the same thing. It is not always the yards. It's the attempts. It's staying with it. Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Wear him down. Help keep that pass rush off you. And then boom, big shot here. Boom, big shot there. To see A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith eaten last night in that game, that could not have worked better for the Philadelphia Eagles. I thought that was just such a masterclass in what Philadelphia did last night compared to what Kansas City did. And there was a lot of people, myself included, that thought that there was a clear advantage in the coaching when it came to Kansas City versus Philadelphia. And last night, we were proven wrong. Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, they outdueled Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo. That's not an opinion. That's fact. Go back into that game. Watch from the beginning what the Eagles were doing and what the Kansas City Chiefs were doing. And listen, don't take anything away from Kansas City being able to stop the run. I thought they did a great job there. But if you're sending all of your resources to thwart whatever the hell that Saquon Barkley is going to do, you got to be able to cover everybody else. And they were unable to do that. Stupid penalties at inopportune times. That was not a game where you look at the Kansas City Chiefs and go, that's a champion. They didn't play like a champion last night, and it hurt them. And the fact that they didn't have just the foundation of what a good team needs to be good in tough games like that, right? I think one of the most underrated parts of the Kansas City Chiefs' success over the last couple of years is the way that they've been able to run the football when they needed 1 yard. A yard here, 2 yards here. They found a way. But last night, they abandoned any hope of that happening because they were throwing the ball. They made stupid mistakes at the worst times. That just did not look like an Andy Reid team. That did not look like the Kansas City Chiefs. Jake Cobian says, I think the way that Mahomes has lost both the Super Bowls should come into the consideration, though. Brady lost 3 Super Bowls by a combined 15 points. Mahomes has lost 2 by a combined 40 points. To me, that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And we have this conversation. All right, how many points did Brady lose by? It doesn't matter. It's not about margin of victory. It's not college sports. It's not about college football in a regular season. You beat this team by 5 compared to beating this team by 25. At the end of the day, it comes down to one thing: wins and losses. That's it. It's not really deeper than that. You look back at that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. Travis Kelce still 8 in that game, over 100 yards. People remember that throw that Pat Mahomes had where he was diving in the air and threw the ball to the end zone. People looked at Patrick Mahomes in that game and were like, wow, that dude, if he had an offensive line, maybe we're having a different conversation today. But they were manhandled in the trenches by the Philadelphia Eagles. There was nothing that Patrick Mahomes could have done to win that game. And it was because he was running for his life. And then Patrick Mahomes, like any quarterback in that situation, feet start moving quickly. You start looking around. Even when the pressure isn't getting on you as quickly as it has in other plays, it's only natural to think that it's coming. And if it shows, you just look at it though, all right? 5 times in history, 5, one of the 2 or 3 greatest quarterbacks in the game have lost the Super Bowl. let's just say for argument's sake, the two best quarterbacks of all time are Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady. Combined, those guys lost 5 times in the Super Bowl. Why? Because of pressure by the opposing defensive line. Whether it was the Giants in the 2 Super Bowls that they beat Tom Brady, whether it was the Eagles, he mentioned it on the broadcast last night with his, Wolverine buddy Brandon Graham anchoring that defense, or when the Bucs beat Mahomes or the Eagles beat Mahomes last night. That is such a key part of winning and losing in the National Football League, is getting pressure on the quarterback. And another reason why I've been shouting to the high heavens to Jason Light and anybody that would listen, you have to get more pass rushers for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it's not just one guy. Go back and watch the game. I mentioned that to my dad as we were watching it. There's just so many different names that contributed to the victory last night. It wasn't just one guy. You just look and you're like, oh, it's this dude and this guy and this guy. And it's another one. Guys you've never even heard of. And then you look at, wow, Milton Williams had 2 sacks last night. Yeah, it was him. Jordan Davis clogging up the front. He had a sack. Yeah, him too. Ajomo. Yeah, him too. J.L.X. Hunt, another guy. Brandon Graham, another guy. Just like, my goodness. Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter. I mean, I thought the Chiefs did a decent job on Jalen Carter last night. He had 2 QB hits, but no tackles, no sacks. But it just shows you when it's certain guys on the defensive line and you can rotate and rotate. And Josh Sweat was phenomenal last night. He's going to get paid in the offseason. 2.5 sacks from him. I thought you could have made a case that he was the MVP, but just more and more players on that D line. You can't just say, I'm going to get one guy. Can't. You have to throw numbers at that position because you got to keep him fresh. And the pass rush is not something that can stop. It has to be relentless. Even if you're not getting to the quarterback, you got to pressure. You got to force throws early. You have to get his feet moving. That's what we saw last night from the Philadelphia Eagles. That defense was incredible. Dave Velasquez looked like Vita, Sue, JPP, and Shaq in the Eagle uniforms. We need Miles Crosby or Parsons ASAP. I don't disagree. Get Trey Hendrickson, get Myles Garrett, get Max Crosby, get one of those guys. But you also have to bring in another guy, draft another one or two. You have to add to the numbers. It needs to be Yaya Diaby and Chris Braswell and one of those big pass rushers and one or two. Just keep throwing numbers at the situation. You have to do that. That is imperative if you want to be successful in the National Football League. So, of course, that's a huge part of it. But I have to salute Jalen Hurts. This is the type of guy you want your kids to model themselves after. I mean, think back to college where he was relieved at halftime by Tua Tagovailoa in the national championship game. And everybody kept saying how embarrassing it was and that guy stinks. Just go back. Go back and read some of the things that people were saying about Jalen Hurts. His career is over. He'll never amount to anything. That's all you heard from trolls and also these quote-unquote experts on social media and TV and radio. The dude didn't pout. The very next season, he spent backing up Tua Tagovailoa. He didn't sit out a year because, remember, the transfer rules were different then. He didn't just leave. He didn't, throw a big hissy fit or a temper tantrum. All he did was back up Tua, continued to be a great teammate, and then got his bachelor's in communication and information sciences. Then he goes to Oklahoma, balls out, finishes second in the Heisman Trophy voting to Joe Burrow, and was breaking Baker Mayfield's records there with the Sooners. Then the kid gets drafted in the second round. He's not the backup quarterback. He's the third quarterback behind Carson Wentz and Nate Sudfeld. Buys his time once again, doesn't pout, just goes out there, works his ass off. And then his first full season as a starter, what does he do? Leads the team to the playoffs. And then they lost to the Bucs in the first round, but gaining valuable knowledge. You knew those guys were going to be back. Second year as a starter, lift off. All the way to the Super Bowl before falling to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Even though in that game he threw for over 300 yards, he rushed for 70 and rushed for 3 touchdowns. Those last 2 Super Bowl records. Gets the big contract in the offseason. Does he rest on his laurels? Do you have to wonder if he's going to work hard? No. He sets more passing records, more rushing records, earns a nod to the Pro Bowl. They faltered down the stretch last season, but they started off hot. I don't know if you could really put that on him. They needed 2 new offensive coordinators. They were getting older on the defensive side of the ball. The issues were, I think, a lot deeper than Jalen Hurts. Comes back this year. equipped with a new OC in Kellen Moore, a star running back in Saquon Barkley, and he was solid all year long. And you look at the numbers kind of just, on the surface, and it's nothing spectacular, but he threw only 5 interceptions all year long. 2 of them came in week 1 in Sao Paulo, Brazil against the Green Bay Packers. So for the rest of the regular season, dude only threw 3 interceptions. He threw 1 interception in the playoffs, and that was that, long pass that he threw last night that pretty much was like a punt, right? It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. It's how many times you get up. This guy has been laughed at. This guy's been scrutinized his entire football career. And don't believe me, go look at the apology that ESPN's Dan Orlovsky made on the air today about Jalen Hurts, saying that he's been harder on him than anybody else. All that dude does is win. All he has done in his entire football career is be professional and supportive of his teammates and does whatever it takes to come out on top. Jalen Hurts has always been resilient. Well, now you can call him a champion. And that picture, that video of him sitting on the floor with the Super Bowl trophy in his hands, good for him. That was almost, symbolic or emblematic of what we saw with Kobe Bryant when he won the championship with the Lakers. Good for Jalen Hurts. For all this crap that we see from professional athletes, they're always bitching and moaning, complaining about stuff. You're like, oh my God, enough. All Jalen Hurts does is shut his mouth and do his job. And people were still hating on him. It's just enough. All right, let's get into the halftime show. Because I thought it was, I knew that a halftime show like this was going to be very polarizing. You're going to get people that love it. You're going to get people that hate it. I thought it was very good. I enjoyed it. But you have to wonder, not wonder, but you have to think too, right? A lot of symbolism means a lot of hidden messages. So things are going to get lost in translation. That's just the way it's going to go. And when you have a guy like Kendrick, who is very monotone, right? He's not a guy that's very loud and boisterous. I mean, he's very detailed. Everything's got like a nice flow to it. So if you didn't know his music, sometimes I think it was hard to follow along transitions from one song to the next. But I do love that it was fast-paced. It was hard-hitting. The choreography was on point. And there was just a lot into it, right? There was a lot that went into it. I think the ending was the best part, right? They not like us. They not like us. Like the beat, they teased that they were going to go to that song and then stopped. They started singing and then boom, went to it at the end. And it was great because my dad was vibing out to it. He liked the song, which I thought was really, really great. I'm very lucky to be able to say that I was raised by 2 people that were always open-minded and just, they're not Kendrick Lamar fans. Like, they don't listen to Kendrick Lamar, but they were both, vibing to it. Like, I love that. That just made me smile. Saying Drake's name was ballsy, and I loved it. Serena Williams dancing, doing the crip walk out there. What a shot across the bow that was, with obviously her relationship with Drake. Game over in the crowd and everybody singing A minor with the A minor chain. I enjoyed it. I had a good time watching it. I understand why some people may have not gotten it. But there was a lot of symbolism in it. Samuel L. Jackson dressing up as Uncle Sam. I get where he was getting at, but let's keep things in perspective too, right? There was people that hated it. I understand that, right? And maybe it's not your thing, right? But I also want to highlight the fact that just because there was an acknowledgement that there is a divide in this country, I think it's important to recognize that it shouldn't be celebrated. Like, let's not celebrate that there was reasons why people either loved this or hated this, right? I think it's important to understand that sports is the ultimate unifier. I said this on the Beckles and Recher podcast last Wednesday, where Ian and I were going back and forth about the Rooney Rule, and I said that the one thing in life where it doesn't matter, your race, your religion, your sexual orientation, the ultimate meritocracy is sports. And we're not talking about the decision to play or people in the media. We're talking about when you're on the court, when you're on the field, when you're on the ice. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what race you are. It really, I mean, things have changed, right? Where remember seeing a black quarterback 20, 30 years ago it was just a handful of guys. People were uneasy about having African Americans as the face of their franchise. Now, last night, you see two black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl. You see a white cornerback with Cooper DeJean, right? Like Cooper DeJean. Like, let's look at situations like this and understand that it's not perfect. Okay. Things may need to change when we're talking about outside society, but we're a young country and things are improving. Things are getting better. So let's keep that in perspective as well. Is when you highlight something like Kendrick did last night about the country being divided, right? Let's acknowledge it, but let's also let's not let that define us. Let's not be happy. Let's not celebrate that. It's not something to be celebrated. Let's find ways to come together. Because as much as people loved Kendrick Lamar's performance last night, one of the loudest cheers in the game last night was when the camera went on Donald Trump. So let's just be mindful of things like that. I did think it was kind of ironic that there was a commercial last night that played multiple times where Snoop Dogg and Tom Brady were talking about, I hate you because of this, I hate you because of this, I hate you because of that. And then the halftime show was Kendrick Lamar, and the final song was one of the best diss tracks we've seen in 2 decades. You know, something that was a direct, shot at Drake. And some people, and I saw this on social media, thought that it was almost gaslighting, not almost, but gaslighting last night, where two guys in Snoop Dogg and Tom Brady, who have been very vocal on behalf of Donald Trump, who people do not appreciate and support his hateful rhetoric, they were the people saying that we got to stop hate. So there's just a lot that goes into it, right? Let's make sure that we're keeping things in perspective, that sports is the ultimate unifier, trying to bring people together. You're going to get people that were very big Trump fans that were happy that he was there last night, first sitting president at the game. There was people that hated it. There's people that loved the halftime show last night in Kendrick Lamar, and there was people that hated it. I mean, that's what this country is all about. But let's, instead of focusing so much on the things that divide us, let's focus more on the things that unify us. And that's why I love sports more than anything, is because you have so many different people from so many different backgrounds that can get together and enjoy it. You put all that shit to the side. But I know it's going to be difficult for people. I do. I mean, you just look. That's the reason why I wanted to do this poll on Twitter. The best part of the Super Bowl, in your opinion, last night? T Swift getting booed, 37%. The game, 30%. The halftime show, 17%. So there's 17% of the people that follow me that thought that the halftime show was the best part. Then you go on the other side, there's 50% of the people say it was the worst part. So it was so polarizing on both sides. I enjoyed it. I thought Kendrick, I thought he did a really good job. I don't know if he was I don't think it was the greatest halftime performance. I love the one a couple of years ago with Dr. Dre and Eminem and a lot of the songs that I can vibe with. That was the music that I grew up on. And I think that's ultimately what the halftime show comes down to. Do you like the performances? Yeah, but I think the majority of the time people like the halftime show because of the songs. They want to try to remember or recognize as many songs as humanly possible. As much as I like the one with Dr. Dre and Eminem and those guys, I love the one with Tom Petty too. I thought that was great. The best one of all time, I think a lot of people can agree, was Prince. Like, that one was fire. So listen, it's just the way it goes. But